Ethan's ship groaned through the silent void of space, systems flickering in and out, leaving him adrift on the edge of survival. He scanned his console, hoping for any sign of life, anything that might bring him back from the darkness closing in. Then, faint and pulsing on his radar like a distant heartbeat, he saw it, a distress signal. Impossible, he murmured, barely believing his eyes. But there it was, a beacon, flickering at the far edge of his scope, as though calling to him from across the stars. He hesitated. Every instinct warned him it was a trap. But with oxygen levels plummeting and his ship on the verge of dying, he had no choice. If this is the end, at least it'll be less lonely, he muttered as he entered the coordinates and nudged his failing ship toward the signal. The engines sputtered, barely responding, and his grip on the steering controls tightened, knuckles white against the dim glow of the console. The distress signal led him to a massive asteroid drifting in the shadow of a dying star, its surface bathed in a sinister crimson hue. Structures loomed ahead, ancient and crumbling, hinting at a long-abandoned civilization. He activated his communicator. "This is Captain Ethan Hale, requesting permission to land," he called out, his voice filling the silence. Static, just static, until he caught a faint movement on the radar. A lone figure near a makeshift landing pad, a shadow against the eerie starlight. Heart pounding, he suited up, descended through the airlock, and stepped onto the cold, desolate surface of the asteroid. The silence was oppressive, each footstep echoing in the dark. Shadows stretched long, distorting the ruins that jutted up around him. And then he saw her, a woman cloaked in darkness, her silhouette impossibly still. She waited, watching him. Swallowing hard, he moved closer, hand hovering near his sidearm. "Did you send a signal?" he called out, trying to sound braver than he felt. She stepped forward, the dim starlight catching her face. Pale, almost glowing skin, eyes dark and magnetic, drawing him in. She tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. "You're human," she said softly, each word like a whisper that wrapped around his mind. Ethan nodded, feeling an inexplicable pull. "Yes, and you? Who are you?" She allowed a faint smile, almost amused. "My name is Salara." Her name echoed strangely, as if it were more than a mere label, a resonance of something ancient and powerful. He sensed an otherworldly danger in her gaze, but kept his hand close to his weapon. "Why are you here?" She watched him with a predatory calm. "Lost souls find their way here. Or perhaps they are drawn here." Her gaze lingered, a slow, piercing study, as if probing his very essence. "But tell me, human, do you believe in curses?" "Curses?" He scoffed, though his pulse quickened. "No, I don't have time for myths." "Don't you?" she asked, a faint smile touching her lips. She took a step closer, and he felt the cold ripple of her presence through his suit. "We are in the space between stars, where myths hold more power than reality. If you doubt that, then why did you follow the signal?" He hesitated, his voice caught in his throat. He didn't know why he'd come, only that the signal had called to him specifically. Salara's eyes gleamed, as if recognizing the conflict within him. "You're curious," she murmured, her voice velvet soft. "But curiosity often demands a price." What price?" he managed, fighting the unease creeping through him. She laughed softly, a chilling sound that seemed to vibrate through the ruins around them. Shadows shifted around her, bending as though in deference. "That remains to be seen." He felt the weight of her words settle over him, a cold certainty pressing down on his spirit. "Look, if you're not going to help me, I'll leave. I have my own problems to solve." "Leave?" Her gaze turned sharp, and the smile vanished from her face. "I'm afraid you won't be leaving, Ethan." He froze, a chill running down his spine at the sound of his name on her lips. How do you know my name?" Salara stepped closer, and he felt the air thicken around him as though reality itself was bending to her presence. "I know many things about you. You came here not by chance, but because I called you." He gripped his weapon, his mind spinning. "Called me? I don't even know you. But you will." Her voice held a dark promise, laced with the kind of inevitability that made his pulse race. We are bound, you and I, by fate, or perhaps by something darker. He took a step back, but her gaze held him captive, a magnetic force he couldn't resist. Her eyes shimmered in the starlight, and beneath their calm surface, he saw a flicker of hunger. Ancient, unyielding, bound, he echoed, dread crawling through him. She nodded, her voice a murmur that sent chills through his veins. Bound by a curse older than stars, and you are the key to breaking it. Ethan's grip on his weapon loosened, caught between the pull of her words and the instinct to run. And if I refuse? Her smile was cold, lips parting to reveal unnaturally sharp teeth that gleamed in the dark. There is no refusal, Ethan. You're already in my world. The words settled on him, pressing with a force that left him breathless. Every fiber of his being screamed to flee, but something deeper, irrational, rooted him to the spot. What do you want from me?" he whispered. Salara stepped closer, her presence overwhelming, as though she were absorbing the very space around them. "Help me break these chains, and I will show you secrets that lie beyond the stars. But know this, the path demands sacrifice." Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. Part of him wanted to escape, to flee her terrible allure. But something within him, a dark fascination he could barely understand, kept him locked in her gaze. "What choice do I have?" he murmured, almost to himself. "None at all," she replied, her eyes glimmering with a triumphant hunger. His heartbeat echoed in the silence, louder than the asteroid's faint atmosphere. Her gaze held him, a force that swallowed every thought, every urge to resist. Why me?" he asked, voice trembling. Salara's smile softened, a flicker of something almost mournful in her eyes, as though his question cut into an ancient wound. "Because, Ethan," she whispered, "you are the only one with the power to release me. And once I'm free," her gaze shifted, filling with a darkness as endless as the void around them. "I will become something far more than either of us can imagine." As her words sank into him, he realized there was no escaping her gravity. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he absorbed her words. The darkness around them seemed to thicken, as though the void itself was aware of the promises lingering in the air. Salara stood close enough now that he could see the contours of her face in haunting detail, the cold gleam in her eyes, the slight parting of her lips, and the strange shadows that seemed to dance just beyond her form. She watched him with an intensity that both terrified and entranced him. He fought against the pull of her presence, taking a shaky step back. "You want me to release you from what, exactly? A prison? A curse?" His voice was barely steady. Her smile was thin, a shadow of amusement playing on her pale face. "You're perceptive, Ethan." "Yes. The prison is old, woven into the stars themselves. And the curse," her gaze dropped, as though seeing something beyond him, into an expanse of time far greater than his mortal mind could fathom. "The curse is tied to blood, to desire, to a hunger that has yet to be sated." Ethan's instincts flared. "And what makes you think I'm willing to be the key to whatever it is you're planning?" Her gaze snapped back to him, her smile sharp. "Because, my dear Ethan, you already are. Your arrival here was no accident. You are part of this, whether you like it or not." He clenched his fists, forcing himself to remain calm. "Look, I don't care what you think I am. I came here because I had no other choice. I'm low on oxygen. My ship is failing." "Your ship will be repaired," she interrupted, as if his words were irrelevant. She raised a hand, and he felt a sudden rush of energy radiating from her. It tingled across his skin, chilling him to the bone. "But there is a price for every favor I grant. If I help you, you must agree to certain terms." The coldness in her tone was undeniable. "And what are these terms?" Salara took a step closer, reaching out her hand, her fingers brushing his face, sending a jolt through his nerves. Her touch was colder than he expected, like the emptiness of space itself. But he could feel the life pulsing within her, something vast, ancient, and unholy. "You will come with me into the heart of this place. There, you will face the bindings that hold me, and break them. I will guide you, of course. She tilted her head, a trace of cruelty glinting in her eyes. But you must do so willingly. I cannot make you, only persuade. Ethan shivered under her touch, fighting against the spell of her voice. Why would I want to help you? I don't know anything about you. For all I know, releasing you could doom me, or worse. Her eyes softened, a flash of what almost seemed like sorrow. She dropped her hand, breaking the contact, and the cold air felt emptier without her touch. Perhaps, she murmured, but I can offer you something no human has ever seen. A glimpse into what lies beyond your narrow reality. He hesitated, curiosity sparking despite his better judgment. And what exactly does that mean? Salara's gaze bore into him, eyes dark and endless as a black hole. You will see the truths woven into the fabric of space, the secrets hidden within the stars, things your kind has only dreamed of. I can show you what it means to live beyond the boundaries of flesh and time. Her words sent a chill down his spine, but he couldn't deny the strange pull of her promise. Knowledge beyond human comprehension, it was tempting, even intoxicating. But a voice of reason cut through his thoughts, reminding him of the countless stories of travelers lost to the darkness. And if I refuse? He asked, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. She let out a low, almost mocking laugh. You're welcome to try, but I doubt your ship has enough fuel left to escape this place. Your fate is already intertwined with mine. Whether you break my chains or not, your path has led you here, to me. She took another step closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. And you will find that the dark has ways of keeping what it desires. He wanted to pull away, to flee from the siren's song of her presence. But even as he tried to resist, he found himself nodding, the faintest sense of resignation creeping over him. Good, she whispered, her voice laced with satisfaction. Then let us begin. Salara led him through the shadows, moving gracefully among the crumbling ruins that marked the surface of the asteroid. Columns rose from the ground, broken and jagged, etched with symbols that glowed faintly under the crimson starlight. Her dark cloak trailed behind her, a spectral wave against the lifeless rock, and Ethan followed, unable to break free of the strange trance that gripped him. As they approached the center of the ruins, he saw an altar carved from a single slab of obsidian. It radiated a cold energy that felt like shards of ice against his skin. Salara turned to face him, her eyes shimmering with an unnatural light. Place your hand here, she commanded, indicating a hollow in the altar. This is where the blood of the one who bound me was once spilled. Only a soul untainted by this curse can open the way. Ethan's hand hovered over the hollow, his fingers trembling. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, to run, to get back to his ship and leave this place far behind. But as he looked up into her eyes, he felt the last of his will slipping away, like sand through his fingers. What will happen to me? He asked, voice barely a whisper. Her gaze softened, her tone almost gentle. You will see more than you could ever imagine. And you may find that in helping me, you help yourself. Before he could second-guess himself, Ethan pressed his hand to the altar. A jolt of energy surged through him, cold and sharp as lightning. He gasped, his mind flooding with strange, disorienting visions, glimpses of alien worlds, creatures with forms beyond comprehension, stars collapsing and rebirthing in violent explosions of color. His heart raced as the visions poured into him, each one wilder, more horrifying, more beautiful than the last. Finally, the energy ebbed, leaving him breathless and shaken. Salara's eyes met his, a flicker of satisfaction in their depths. You've done it, she whispered, her voice a mix of awe and something darker, hungrier. She reached out, grasping his hand in her cold grip, and a faint tremor ran through her. The chains are weakening, the barrier fading. Ethan's knees buckled as he felt the weight of something vast and powerful pressing against the edges of reality. It was as if a door had opened, leading to a place where the stars themselves whispered secrets too terrible to be known. Salara's grip tightened, her gaze sharpening with a feral intensity. There is one final step, Ethan, One last offering, to fully set me free. Dread pooled in his stomach. Well, what offering? She leaned closer, her face inches from his, and he felt her cold breath on his skin. Her gaze held a strange mixture of pity and delight, as though she mourned what she was about to do, and reveled in it. Your blood, Ethan. Just a taste. Enough to awaken me, to renew what was lost. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. He had heard of vampires, of creatures that fed on the life force of others, but he had never imagined they would look so human, so beautiful. Yet he couldn't deny the predatory gleam in her eyes, the hunger lurking beneath her calm exterior. Will I survive? He asked, voice barely steady. A faint smile curved her lips, one that spoke of dark promises and secrets untold. Yes, she whispered, though you may wish you hadn't. Before he could resist, her hand rose to his neck, cold fingers tracing the pulse at his throat. She leaned in, and he closed his eyes, feeling the pressure of her lips against his skin. And then pain, sharp and fierce, followed by a flood of euphoria, as though the very essence of his soul was being drawn from him. The world blurred, shadows dancing, as he felt his strength ebb away. But in the depths of his fading consciousness, he sensed something profound, a bond forming, a dark tether that linked their fates together, sealing their union in the blood of stars. As the darkness claimed him, he heard her voice, soft and triumphant. You're mine now, Ethan. Together. We will break the heavens or burn beneath them. And then there was only silence. Ethan's vision flickered as he struggled to open his eyes. The world felt distant, as if he were floating through some hazy dream. His body ached, his pulse pounding in his ears like a drumbeat from another lifetime. The cold, eerie sensation of Salara's bite still lingered on his skin, a reminder of the dark bond they had forged. As the haze began to lift, he became aware of the strange, metallic taste in his mouth, the faint remnants of blood, his blood still clinging to his senses. His hand shot to his neck instinctively, but the wound was gone, as if it had never existed. He sat up, his head spinning as he tried to make sense of what was happening. The ground beneath him was hard and unyielding, the ruins around him now bathed in a dull red light. The distant hum of the asteroid's failing atmosphere seemed to pulse in time with his own heartbeat. Ethan, her voice was like silk, soft and inviting, but with an edge that cut straight through his thoughts. He turned, his body stiff with lingering weakness. Salara stood in the shadows, her form more solid than before, her eyes gleaming like twin stars. There was a sense of power radiating from her now, a force that he had not felt before. You're awake, she said, her voice a whisper that reverberated in the stillness of the ruins. Good. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, trying to steady himself, to shake off the disorienting sensations that still clung to him like cobwebs. What the hell was that? What did you do to me? Her lips curved into a faint smile, but there was no humor in it. I've given you a glimpse of the power that flows through me. A taste, if you will. She stepped closer, her every movement graceful, predatory. And now, you are bound to me. There is no turning back. Ethan's heart thudded painfully in his chest. He could feel her words more deeply now, as if they were imprinted directly into his soul, seeping into every thought, every breath. He could feel the connection between them, a dark tether, a bond forged by blood and will. And something else, something ancient and alive. I didn't agree to this, he spat, his voice rough, but there was little conviction in it. He knew that protesting was futile now, that he had already stepped into a world far beyond his understanding. Her eyes softened, though her smile remained the same. You didn't need to. Fate has a way of drawing us where we belong. She extended her hand to him, the dark power surrounding her like a cloak of shadows. Come, it's time to finish what we started. Despite his growing dread, Ethan stood. He didn't want to follow her, but the pull was undeniable. His mind screamed at him to resist, but his body moved as if it had a mind of its own. He couldn't explain it, but the bond they shared now seemed to guide him, urging him forward. They walked deeper into the heart of the asteroid, where the ruins gave way to a vast, circular chamber. The walls were carved from the rock itself, smooth and polished, glowing with an unnatural light that seemed to emanate from the very stones. Ancient symbols, intricate and cryptic, were etched into the floor, their meaning lost to time, but still resonating with an eerie, palpable energy. In the center of the chamber, a massive structure loomed, a black, obsidian altar similar to the one from before, but far larger, far more imposing. It hummed with power, a dark rhythm that seemed to sync with Ethan's own pulse. At the base of the altar was a large, hollowed-out basin, its edges jagged, worn smooth by centuries of use. This, Salara said, her voice reverent, is where it began. The curse, the chains that bind me. Ethan's stomach twisted. And what do you expect me to do? You've already taken what you needed. Her eyes glinted with something almost predatory. No, Ethan. You've only just begun to understand your role in this. To truly break the curse, you must offer something more. His throat tightened. What do you mean? I've already given you my blood. She stepped closer, her presence overwhelming, filling the space with an oppressive energy. Blood is only the beginning. To break the chains, to shatter the curse that has held me for centuries, we must offer more than flesh. We must offer life, the essence of existence itself. Ethan recoiled, his breath hitching. I'm not giving you my life. I didn't sign up for this. Her lips parted in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You already have, Ethan. The moment you set foot on this cursed rock, you became part of the ritual. You are more than a mere participant. You are the key. The life force you carry, the energy that pulses through your veins, is the final piece. He swallowed hard, his mind racing. He'd known from the start that coming here had been a mistake. But he'd been desperate, alone in the void of space. And now he understood that his actions had led him into something far darker than he could have ever imagined. Salara reached out, placing her hand on his chest, her fingers cold against his skin. Her touch burned, not with heat, but with an otherworldly chill that sank into his very bones. I gave you a taste of what I can offer, she murmured, her voice a velvet caress. But this will be something far greater. You will feel the power of the stars themselves flowing through you, Ethan. The strength of the universe will be yours to command. His heart hammered in his chest as he struggled against her touch. You don't understand. I'm not like you. I don't have what you need. She didn't pull away. Instead, her lips brushed against his ear, and her voice became a low, dark whisper. You are mistaken. I do not need you, Ethan. We need each other. You see, the curse that binds me also binds you now. Your fate is intertwined with mine. To set me free, to release both of us from the chains of the past, you must offer more than you can ever comprehend. Her words echoed in the chamber, and suddenly, everything felt too small, too tight. Ethan's chest tightened, and he staggered backward, pulling away from her. No, I won't do this. I refuse. Salara's expression darkened, the playful amusement gone. You have no choice. I will break you if I must. You will fulfill your role. The room began to shift around him. The walls seemed to pulse, the air growing thick, as if the very space itself was bending, twisting, in response to her command. Ethan's breath came faster as the shadows deepened, the power in the room growing unbearable. He reached for his sidearm, his fingers trembling as he drew it from its holster. The cold metal felt like a distant comfort in his grip. I won't be your puppet. Salara's eyes gleamed with unholy light. She took a step forward, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that froze him in place. Then die, Ethan. Let the curse claim you fully, and let me take what is rightfully mine. Before he could react, her hand shot out, faster than he could follow. A burst of cold energy enveloped him, and his weapon flew from his grasp, clattering to the floor. His body felt like it was being crushed under an invisible weight, his lungs gasping for air as the world began to warp and spiral around him. Salara stepped closer, her expression a mixture of pity and cold satisfaction. You will give me what I need, Ethan. There is no escape. As darkness closed in around him, He realized that the true price of his life was yet to be revealed, and it was far more than he had ever imagined. Ethan's world collapsed into darkness, his mind reeling as the oppressive weight of Salara's power suffocated him. Her cold energy wrapped around his chest like iron, tightening with every breath he tried to take. His vision blurred, and the air seemed to thicken, pressing in on him until he could scarcely move. Every instinct screamed for him to fight, to run, but his body was paralyzed, trapped in a cocoon of shadow and cold. "You can't fight what you don't understand," Salara's voice echoed through the void, distant but impossibly close, vibrating against his bones. Her words were both comforting and cruel, as if she were speaking from the depths of his soul. Her touch, when it came, was like ice. She reached out and cupped his face with a hand that was both tender and terrifying. Her eyes glimmered with an intensity that made his heart stutter, drawing him into their endless depth. "You are not the first to come here," she whispered, her voice low and filled with a dark knowing. "Many have tried before you. Many have come, lured by the promise of power, of knowledge, of breaking free from the weight of their own existence." Ethan couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and strange understanding. Salara's words echoed within him, and for a moment he almost believed them. He could almost feel the cosmic force within him, a pull toward the darkness, toward the curse that held them both captive. "You think you can stop this," Salara continued, her face so close now that he could feel her breath on his skin, cold as death itself. "But it's not about what you want. It's about what is meant to be." And then, as if his body were no longer his own, Ethan's chest tightened painfully, the pressure building until his vision flared with white-hot light. He gasped, his breath like shattered glass in his lungs, and for a brief moment he thought he might die. But it wasn't death that came. It was something else. He saw it then, the curse, the binding that Salara spoke of. It wasn't a chain of iron or steel, but of energy, of an ancient, incomprehensible force that stretched across space and time. It wove through Salara's being like a thread through the fabric of the universe. And now, it was entwining him as well, pulling him into its cosmic grip. He understood. The curse was not just hers. It was theirs together. "You are the final piece," Salara murmured, her voice both sweet and bitter. "The key to breaking this cycle, to breaking the curse, and freeing us both." The pressure in Ethan's chest began to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, and with each beat, he felt himself being drawn deeper into the web of energy that bound him to her. He could feel his own life force slipping away, sinking into the pull of the curse, and for the first time, he understood what it meant to be her prisoner. But he wasn't just her prisoner. He was a prisoner of the universe itself, of something far older, far more terrifying than he could imagine. A realization struck him with the force of a comet. "No," he gasped, shaking his head, the truth crashing down on him like a tidal wave. "You're not trying to break the curse. You want to keep it. You need it. Without it, you would cease to exist." Salara's gaze darkened, the faintest flicker of something, almost regretful, crossing her face. But the cold smile returned almost immediately, as if she had never faltered. "That's right, Ethan. The curse is not something that binds me. It is what keeps me alive. Without it, I would wither and die, lost in the depths of space. It is a prison, yes, but it is also my lifeline. I have been trapped here for centuries, and I will be here for centuries more unless I can break the cycle. Unless you break it for me." Her words cut through him like shards of glass, but a flicker of defiance sparked within him. He had been brought here by a cruel twist of fate, drawn into a game he didn't understand. And yet, he realized now that the game was not over. It was never about breaking her curse. It was about breaking his own. He had come here because he was lost, drifting through space, searching for meaning in the endless void. But now he had a choice. He could choose to be bound by the curse, trapped in this endless dance with Salara, or he could choose freedom. Freedom from the curse, from her, and from the fate that had been written for him. His hand moved instinctively to his side, where the weapon had fallen earlier. He gripped it tightly, feeling the weight of it like a lifeline in his hand. "I will never be your tool," Ethan said, his voice stronger now, more certain. "I will never be a part of this cursed existence." Salara's expression twisted, a flicker of anger flashing in her eyes. "You think you have a choice? You are a part of this, Ethan. You've always been. You can't escape it." Ethan's hand tightened on the weapon, but it wasn't his weapon that mattered anymore. It was his will, his choice. With a surge of strength, he fired. But it wasn't a shot aimed at her. It was aimed at the altar, the massive obsidian structure that had pulsed with dark energy. The blast hit it with a deafening crack, sending a shockwave through the chamber. The ground beneath them trembled, and the shadows that had clung to the room began to shift, rippling like smoke. "No!" Salara screamed, her voice a harsh wail of fury and fear. But it was too late. The curse was unraveling. The light from the altar flickered, dimming, its grip on the chamber loosening. The shadows around Ethan dissolved into nothingness, and for the first time, he could breathe freely. The suffocating darkness lifted, and the chains that had bound him, both physical and spiritual, snapped apart like brittle threads. Salara staggered backward, her form flickering like a fading hologram. You fool!" she cried, her voice echoing in the now empty chamber. But Ethan wasn't listening anymore. The power, the weight of the curse was gone. He felt lighter, freer than he had ever felt before. He turned, walking toward the now deactivated ship. Salara's voice followed him, but it was distant, fading into the emptiness of space. "You think you've won? You think you're free? You will never be free, Ethan. You can't escape the stars. You can't escape me." Ethan didn't turn back. He stepped onto the ship, his hands steady on the controls as he prepared to leave the cursed asteroid behind. The engines sputtered to life, weak but functional. His heart pounded in his chest, not with fear, but with something else, something like hope. He had survived, and for the first time since his life had been torn apart in the void of space, he felt like he might just have a future. And that, for the first time, was a future of his own making.